Welcome to the Smart Money Town Hall. We are going to have a quick session today, which will be fun, but let me pull up my trusty PowerPoint. Like I said, I'm actually super interested in what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to skip the introductions. I think you and I have been over that enough.
Have you started recording yet?
Yes, we are recording. You can still be a smart ass.
Okay, all right. I know where to, to behave myself or not behave myself.
Oh no, don't behave ever. Or behave in the manner of which you would like.
Okay.
So again, as usual, we're going to go over our 5 economic measures. A lot of people kind of just look at the stock market and think that's how the economy is doing, but that's actually not the case for a couple of reasons, and it makes our conversation today a lot more interesting. When we kind of look at what the stock market is doing and what that actually means for the overall economy, I find the interplay between the two actually very interesting. But then we all know I'm a giant nerd. So we're going to go over employment, housing, inflation, which actually has changed, spending, and confidence. Unemployment has actually improved. We added quite a few jobs last month. And we had the really big uptick in April where a lot of people got laid off, and we've been steadily improving ever since then. An ideal unemployment rate is between 2 and 4%. Less than that, and employers can't find people to hire to expand. More than that, and of course, families are suffering with a high unemployment rate. So we've seen a really good improvement there, and this is pretty exciting. We added almost 1 million jobs last month, which, yeah, it's really good news. Oh, Joshua is joining us.
I think only because he has to.
He told me he wouldn't make it, and I didn't give him the evil. He told me he wouldn't make it. I didn't give him the evil eye or anything. So you made it.
Yeah, the all hands was canceled, and then stand up ran over. Otherwise, I would have been here 10 minutes ago.
We've got a couple people MIA and a couple of last minute emergencies. So it's kind of a shame because actually this month I think things are super interesting. So
yeah.
So the last slide, I'm actually going to go back. Oops. I'm actually going to go back to this. So unemployment is better, but unemployment is actually a measure of how many people are still seeking jobs. And so when people drop completely out of the employment cycle, they're not reflected in this. So the actual unemployment rate of people who might want or need jobs but aren't actually seeking could actually be quite a bit higher, something like 8 to 9%. I've heard some people say as high as 10%, but I think that's fear mongering and I don't do that. So a 6% unemployment rate is still not great. And we have seen a lot of gains last kind of late fall. We saw July, August, September, we saw some great gains, but now we're kind of just creeping back. And so we need to do something to get that unemployment rate lower, especially since we can kind of tell that the unemployment rate that we see here isn't actually the true measure of unemployment. This is the first time we've seen this in over a year. We've added almost 1 million jobs, which is awesome. Again, we see our 12-month change at still a -7 million jobs, and those aren't all reflected in the unemployment rate because, again, some of these 6.7 million jobs, some of these people have dropped out of the workforce and aren't looking right now. So we still have a ways to go, but this February-March number of jobs added is really encouraging, and I'm really pleased to see that. We also look at hourly earnings. Last April, we had a huge uptick, which was super interesting. And if you'll remember, that uptick happened because the people who lost jobs were lower paid, lower skilled workers in the hospitality and retail industries. So hourly earnings are fairly steady. It says -0.1%. But they revise numbers every month. So they put out their initial numbers and then they revise them over time. So I think last month, February numbers were down 0.2%, and as you can see on the graph, it actually got revised up 0.5% to plus 0.3. So the minus 0.1, like that's not actually a worry. The really good news is that hourly earnings are up 4% year over year from last year. So that is good news. It means that for kind of the first time in a few years, wages are actually outstripping inflation. So people are making more money. It's not just getting more and more and more expensive to live. So I actually think that's super encouraging, and I really like seeing that. And you guys can jump in anytime, anything you find interesting or something you read in the news that catches your attention. Housing starts were a little, I was almost going to say a little anemic, but housing starts were downright bad in February. It dipped down quite a lot. And we saw, as you can see over the last year, we saw this uncharacteristic dip in February. And it turned out that just the entire month just went badly. And it's because the weather was so bad across the nation that it depressed housing starts, and it depressed them in a much worse way than we've seen. There's kind of always a downtick in housing, or at least housing doesn't grow as quickly over the winter, but that downtick was actually really severe and it rebounded. So we can kind of just pretend February never happened and we're still on pace. So February, March, it says up 19.4% from February, but it's up a normal amount from if January, February, March were in line. So it's still in the green, it's still good. We give that a green, we give that an A, and we move on. Actually, again, I'm gonna go back because when we look at economic measures, I only look at housing starts for this town hall because there's about 16,000 measures involving real estate that have an effect on the economy. And housing start is just the one I picked. It's fairly solid. Housing starts indicates the construction industry's confidence that the housing units they're building now will be sold. And so there's a lot of measures of real estate. And of course, all of us here live in the Denver area, and we know that Denver's housing market in terms of housing sales is absolutely nuts. People are putting their houses on them. Yeah, Robin.
I do have a question about that. I know in the past, construction would always overbuild. Have they gotten to the point now where they wait on their start until the unit's sold, or are they still building some units in the hopes that they will sell?
That's a really good question. I'm really sure that a lot are still built on speculation.
Okay.
I'm really sure that a lot of them are still built on speculation, but what I find interesting is that you don't have a lot of housing units sitting empty, whether we're talking apartments or commercial real estate or residential single family homes, that kind of thing. One thing I find really interesting about it, though, is that even if they oversupply and they build on speculation, it's not decreasing housing costs. They're still charging the earth.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's a crappy apartment and they slap some crown molding on it and call it a luxury apartment and sell it for twice the price. It's dumb, but what are people supposed to do?
Yeah.
Yep.
They end up moving back in with mom and dad. They end up having 16 roommates.
That's a lot of people in a 2-bedroom.
Well, I remember, I think we all start out there. You know, like your college, you're a young adult, you have roommates. Like, what about you, Robin? Was that your experience?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Started out with 3 roommates, graduated to 2 roommates, then got down to 1. And I remember the first time I actually had my own apartment, probably in my mid to upper 20s, maybe even 30. I don't know. Pretty exciting stuff, though. You know, that was a big deal.
Yeah, so I don't think that's abnormal. I think that's actually a really normal part of the human existence. It was probably back in the 30s and 40s that people moved out of mom and dad's house into their own. But I think we all kind of expect that that's what should happen, when the reality is closer to what all of us have experienced, where you've got roommates and then maybe you have fewer roommates and then maybe you lose your job for a while and you have more. I mean, I really don't think that it's normal to think of being able to afford your own place all at once.
Yeah, and I did have to move back in with mom and dad one time in those early years. So,
Yeah.
you know, and I think my daughter's coming back due to her housing situation. So it's very, very flexible.
Yeah.
But you're right. Nobody can afford a single apartment right out the bat. I mean, never have, unless you're working for your law degree or something. I don't know.
Yeah. And with no student loans, because those can be crippling nowadays.
Yes. Very crippling.
But another thing I was reading about recently was something called being cost burdened. And cost burdened is when you're spending more than 30% of your salary on your housing. Now, something like 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 homeowners is cost burdened. You're house poor, right? But something like 50% of renters are cost burdened. And people, and like we said, people have roommates. So each of those people in that house are cost burdened. Yeah, but there's so much to go into with housing, residential, homeowner, commercial, that it's super complex. So I almost feel like I oversimplified it for these purposes, but it works again for our purposes of measuring how the economy is doing. Inflation. This always used to be my favorite slide back in the early days of the pandemic when everything had kind of gone to crap, right? So for a goal of an inflation rate of 0 to 2% is ideal. Again, too low of inflation, and it means that businesses aren't growing. Too much inflation, and it affects households negatively. So we have seen inflation tick up, and that's the topic of a lot of my reading online. What's the Fed going to do about it? Because one of their strongest tools for controlling inflation is keeping the Fed reserve funds rate low. That's what mortgage interest rates and loan interest rates are based off of. Well, it's been 0 to 0.25% since last March. They can't make it lower. So they need to use other tools to control inflation, and we are seeing inflation tick up. This 4.2%, it might be transitory. The producer price index, this 4.2% might be transitory, so it still stays in the blue. We're going to give that a B and see how that rolls. But for the first time since the pandemic, we're seeing inflation tick up a bit, and people are worried about it. There's actually some indicators that this last year has been amazing for things like the stock market. 3/4 of Americans are doing as well or better than they were before the pandemic. Now, having 1/4 of households in real trouble is a problem. So if inflation keeps ticking up, average Americans might not feel that very much, especially at first. But with 1/4 of American households in trouble, they're going to feel inflation really badly. And so those people who are already in trouble are going to be in further trouble. Isn't that interesting?
Can any of this be attributed to the bailout money or the
infrastructure bill or the COVID relief bill?
the COVID relief? Just the influx of money,
all of it together. Actually, what we have seen is that people are socking that money away. Again, if 3/4 of American households are getting that stimulus money and 3/4 of American households are actually doing well, there is some overlap there. And so those people who are doing well and getting that that stimulus money, a lot of people are actually socking it away and saving it. We've seen savings of Americans go up by something like 25 trillion last year. So people are saving it, they're not spending it. And a $1,400 stimulus check, people aren't, even if someone goes on vacation, that's one vacation. People aren't going to keep spending money. So no, the inflation rate isn't going up because of the stimulus. The inflation rate is going up because more people are getting vaccinated and things are opening up. People are spending more. So it has more to do with so the inflation rising has more to do with the pandemic than the actual stimulus. In which case, when you think of how many people got stimulus and just socked it away. Now, Americans are notoriously bad at saving money, right? The 3 people in this Zoom room are actually good at saving money. A lot of Americans are, but by far the majority of Americans either are bad at saving because they've never been taught, or they're honestly living hand to mouth and they can't.
Mhm.
So I find it really interesting that we did give a lot of stimulus money and it was necessary for so very many people. We still saw a lot of evictions that shouldn't have happened because of the eviction protection. And then if you look at that further, you have to worry about landlords who they still have to pay their mortgages even if they're not getting rent. So the pandemic caused a lot of these enormously complex issues to kind of rise to the surface. Super interesting. Spending. GDP is evaluated on a quarterly basis, not a monthly basis. So we saw Q1, that dipped kind of in March, so we didn't see a huge dip there. Q2, enormous dip, everything was shut down. Q3 kind of almost brought us back. So remember how math works. When you lose 31% in Q2, it takes more than 31% to get back to whole, right? That's just how math works. So going down 30% and then going up 30% got us about halfway back to where we needed to be in terms of GDP production. Does that make sense? So we are still lagging behind where you'd think we should be in Q1. And we do not have Q1 numbers yet, even though it's April and it's almost a month past the end of the quarter. But we should see that next month. Retail sales are up again. It's great. They were down in February, a little more than would be expected for that time of year. So retail sales are doing very well. Durable goods sales are doing okay. Again, durable goods are things like cars, appliances, furniture, stuff you keep around for a while. And so that's a really good measure of how confident people are about the future, as well as how manufacturers are producing and selling, what they think is coming down the pike. So durable goods sales, we'd give that a B. Retail sales are up, that's great, we give that an A. Consumer confidence, confidence level high. I really like that cartoon, it's super cute.
Hilarious.
So the
Try not to have growth spurts.
the leading economic index was put into place in 2016, and that happened after the 2008 recession, because as the economy recovered from 2008, they realized that all of the old measures of measuring the economy just weren't complex enough to really reflect how the economy was doing. So they came up with the leading economic index, and frankly, I think that this recession was really abnormal. So I think that they're going to change the leading economic index parameters or scrap it and come up with something new altogether. That would be enormously complex, so I don't see that happening anytime soon. So the leading economic index went up by about 1%, which doesn't sound like a lot, especially when you consider margin of error, but that actually is quite a lot. And so people are very excited that the leading economic index grew so well. And the consumer confidence score shot up by something like 10 points. And so that was really amazing this last month. Now there is a concern there. Are we going into a bubble? And the answer is probably not. Again, the part of the economy that's suffering, and the inequality here is really staggering, but the part of the economy that is suffering are Americans who were already at the poverty level or below. The Americans who were already living hand to mouth, already had low skill, low paid jobs. So as sad as it is to see millions of households suffering, it honestly doesn't affect the economy that much overall. Isn't that strange? You think we're all in this together.
One would think.
Should be.
But overall, consumer confidence is great. Things are opening up. It's spring. People are able to get outside and get rid of their cabin fever. Maybe not in Colorado. We've had an unusually cold winter, but overall consumer confidence is high. And no, we do not think that's a bubble that's going to burst. And the stock market is amazing. It's grown almost 50% in the last year. So that's really good. And of course, we also think, does that mean it's a bubble? You know, not a bubble in the general economy, but a bubble in the stock market. And there's always a concern that there will be a correction. Some people call it a correction. Most Americans are going to call it a crash. And the Fed actually is not silent on this. There are a lot of companies that are overvalued right now. And you know
Yes.
what? No one's worried about it because that has always been the case for the stock market. This is why looking at the stock market is a terrible indicator of how the economy is doing overall. Because 90% of the stock market is big businesses investing in other big businesses. 10% of the stock market is Americans like you and me with their 401ks. 10%. So all of us Americans who are invested in the stock market are going to have a relatively very small effect on how the stock market does. But again, the stock market is a really good indicator of overall economic confidence. If 90% of it is big business and big business thinks we're doing well and we should invest, that's going to affect how they perform, how they hire, and that's going to affect the rest of us as well. So this is really good. There are a lot of companies that are expecting a downturn this year, and that's going to be a combination of inflation, people going out and being more active, spending more, as well as kind of an imbalance between people wanting jobs and companies not being able to hire and have jobs available. But
I'm curious why you don't include a slide that has the Standard & Poor 500.
this is the S&P.
This is the S&P?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's also the Dow Jones Industrial Average, but the S&P has been a better marker of the economy for about the last 3-4 years.
This is the S&P, so I've got something to measure against. I'll be doing. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it used to be the Dow Jones Industrial Average, but for the last 3 or 4 years, the S&P has tracked the economy more closely.
Is that because the S&P is 500 companies versus the Dow Jones is like 30 or so?
Exactly.
Yep.
And the S&P is a lot of different industries. NASDAQ, the NASDAQ index is more tech companies. And so the NASDAQ is enormously volatile. Over time, the NASDAQ actually has had better growth than either the Dow Jones or the S&P. But it's just so volatile that it's really not a good measure of looking at confidence, economic growth, anything like that. So even though there's a lot of companies in the S&P that are overvalued and a lot of issues there, it's still the best marker among the major indexes. All this stuff is so complicated. I love this stuff. I think it's really cool. So what does it all mean? This is the part that we care about. So for the first time since I've started my town halls last fall, inflation is all in the blue. It was all in the green for a good long time. And confidence is all in the green. We are headed in good directions. There is caution. We need to keep an eye on inflation, and we need to keep an eye on market corrections due to the recession and the pandemic. But honestly, hopefully we're really on the tail end of it. It was the fastest.
By keeping an eye on it, makes it sound like there's something that you could do if it starts to go south.
Yes, and that's actually our Smart Money Minute today. That is what it's like I cued you, Robin.
Wow.
Yes. So we're actually going to talk about that in a few minutes. So things are looking really good. So we give it a grade we give it a B+. And again, the only reason it's not an A- are those cautionary signs, mostly regarding inflation and the fact that so many households are still suffering. if there was less inequality, I would definitely give the economy like an A- right now. But there's just so much inequality, you can't ignore the fact that tens of millions of American households are in trouble. And once you get into a bad spot economically and financially, it's really hard to get yourself out of that hole. I mean, sometimes I think we think that people do it to themselves because they make bad decisions. But if your choices are credit card debt or drawing from your 401k, what should you do? Long term versus short term? You know, if your choices are, do I put food on the table or not? People are going to do anything they need to do that. So we are this close to an A-, which is cool.
It's when they buy the $1,000 phone that I get the anxiety as far as the choices of purchasing power.
Yeah. And a lot of that is economic anxiety, or a lot of that is economic pressure. Like, go try finding a smartphone that doesn't cost $1,000.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear about the Obama phone program?
No.
I did.
So the Obama phone program was a highly criticized program where the Obama administration provided a cell phone to anyone who couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the interesting part about this is that George W. Bush was the first one who started it. It's actually the Bush phone. And he did that because his administration recognized that technology was never going to go away. People were going to depend on it more and more. It was a safety issue, you know, when you had a cell phone with you in the car, or when you had a cell phone with you and you were in a domestic violence situation and couldn't access a landline. It was considered a safety issue and an economic issue. So Bush actually started that program. I like that man. He is wonderful. Actually, we're going to take a little side note here. I just got George Bush's new book.
Out of many, one. Oh, wow.
Out of many, one. So after he became president, he took up the hobby of painting. So if you look at his paintings, you're like, oh, honey, that's so cute. He's never going to be a fabulous painter, but there's a lot of emotion and heart in what he does. So his first book was about American soldiers. He would paint the soldier and then tell their story. And this one's all about immigrants. Anyway, George W., I like him a lot. I think he did a lot of very good things. But anyway, the cell phone program, that is a base model. And so people who think, you know, they need their cell phone, some people kind of do need it for work. Other people just want to text their friends.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to pay $1,000 to text your friends, but you cannot find a smartphone for less than $800. Think about how much you're paying. How many hours of work is that for the average person? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, they're no longer subsidized by the phone companies selling you a contract every year, right?
True.
I don't know.
Because you used to be able to get a free phone with your
2-year
AT&T
contract.
2-year contract.
Yeah. They don't offer that anymore?
Nope.
Huh.
It's
Nope.
monthly pay as you go.
Yeah, and they do an installment plan where there's like 17 new pages of agreements you have to read.
Wow.
Nobody reads those, of course, because it's just like any end user license agreement or terms of service. Nobody reads that stuff.
Which is scary. There could be something
Yes.
in there, you know.
Yes.
When I was
we can delete all the data on your phone.
Yeah, when I was running the parking program for RTD, I was involved very heavily in those terms and agreements, and I read them, you know, because I had to, because that's what we were putting out to the public. But nobody else would read them, and I can't tell you how many times that, you know, when there's an issue, you got to go back to them and show people, you know, you signed this, and they're like, well, we didn't read it. Well,
Not my problem.
yeah, but then I feel guilty because then I don't read the ones that I click on. So
I used to skim through them just because I swear someday AT&T is going to slip in there. You know, you owe us your firstborn child or something, you know?
yeah,
Right.
yeah, you buy us a car, yeah.
So yeah, even little decisions like a cell phone, they're enormously complicated. There's a lot of issues behind them. And a lot of these things are connected to everything else, like the user agreements. That's across industries, everything you do. So
Yeah.
life is really complicated.
As it
Can
turns
be.
out.
Uh-huh.
It can also be very uncomplicated.
True.
Yesterday, I spent the whole day, and then at the end of the day, I was like, honey, where's my phone? She's like, I don't know. I did not leave my phone one time the entire day. Yeah. Yeah. And so then she called me, and I'd left it upstairs where I fed the cats in the morning.
Yes, we don't need to make life complicated. That's for sure.
But if you're working, you do. You do have to have that connection and communication.
Yeah. So I kind of feel like we had our discussion. Anything else that you guys have read or find interesting or what have you?
I'm kind of taken aback that I didn't realize that you were showing the Standard & Poor all this time, and I was thinking Dow Jones for some stupid reason.
Because the Dow Jones was the standard for 30 years. That's why.
Yeah. Huh. That's crazy. I think my mom's significant other uses the Russell Peters or the Russell 800, whatever it is.
Yes, there's so many indexes now, like the Hang Seng is new. There's so many new market indexes. What's the newish Japanese index? It's only like 7 or 8 years old. But there's a couple that are really gaining steam all across the world too. So I expect those to come into prominence as better markers of the international economy.
Yeah, he uses that one. This one sounds like it's a pretty good one.
S&P? Yeah. It tracks the economy. It's tracked the economy fairly closely, but again, it suffers from all of the problems of big business investing in other big business overvaluation. Yeah.
You can't eliminate that. You just can't.
And volatility, good news comes out, it jumps, bad news comes out, it drops, comes back the next day.
The sad part about that, you said we have such a small influence, and we do, because we only have 10% investment, but we have such a huge result, right? If they do something bad and it drops, the results are devastating for us, right? I mean, we don't influence it, but yet we get influenced tremendously.
Yeah.
By it.
Well, and an interesting thing that Melissa and I were talking about the other day is that the stock market, most of the investors are businesses investing in other businesses.
Yeah.
The individual investors and the retirement accounts and all the mutual funds that people are in, like individuals, is only, what was it, like 10%? It's less than 10%.
Yeah, just what we were talking about just now. 10% is individuals with their retirement plans. So
now the good news
so
about
I find that
that,
highly interesting.
well, the good news about that is they're self-incentivized to do well, right? Because the big businesses don't want to go under either. So they've got that built-in incentive to make money, and we benefit from that, right? They don't like to go under either, but they also like to buy each other out, and that's the part that gets crazy for me. There's supposed to be monopoly laws out there, and they are feeding off each other and conglomerating and buying out the competition.
Yeah.
It's a little scary at times.
Yeah, I was a small business owner for over a decade, and what I found so interesting is that in this day and age, it is easier than ever to open a small business. A lot of things are available online. You can do your own research. You don't really need to hire a business lawyer anymore. So on one hand, it's almost easier than ever. On the other hand, economically, it's harder than ever because these bigger companies have such a monopoly on the market. People don't want to pay more for good quality, organic, handmade, local, whatever, because it's so much cheaper to go to the grocery store, Target, or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely.
So.
Walmart, Costco, yeah.
So.
And yet we go there.
So today, we're actually going to go back to revisit your question, Robin. Things are going really well, but there still are reasons for caution. And so what do we do about that as individuals? And so today we're going to talk about why zero is your hero.
Zero is your hero. Wow.
Zero is your hero.
Today we're going to be doing alliterations during Toastmasters. I'm still not sure how I'm going to fit all that in.
That one's really hard unless you have something pre-prepared. And unfortunately, I do have a schedule conflict, so I won't make it to Toastmasters today.
Can I use or Zero is the new hero, or can I?
Yes, Zero is the new hero.
All right.
So
'Cause that's a good alliteration right there.
I am not a Debbie Downer. You know, there are some people who are fear mongers who say, oh, things are going well. That means we're headed for a correction. No, no, no. That is not what we're talking about today. And that's just not how I approach things. I tend to be fairly optimistic about things. Welcome back, Jay.
Thank you.
We finished our economic update, and we're actually on our financial education for the day. And Robin had a really good question. So the economy is doing really quite well. There are really only a couple of things that are very cautionary in nature that kind of make us want to slow down rather than full speed ahead. And so what we're talking about for our financial education today is Zero is your hero. And so the reason for that is, again, the reasons for caution that we have are that there are still so many American households that are suffering. By and large, we're doing really well. But that suffering of other people is actually going to affect us. When children grow up in poverty, it's very hard for them to get out of it. So poverty becomes a generational problem. And do you know what generational problems become? Taxpayer problems. We've had a lot of stimulus. We can expect tax rates to go up. And this isn't going to be a partisan issue, you know, Democrat versus Republican. No, no, no. Tax rates are just going to go up because we need to pay for the Iraq War. We're still paying for that. We need to pay for the 2008 bailouts. We're still paying for that. In addition to the enormous amounts of stimulus that we've had this past year in this American Rescue Plan, you know, the details of which are not hammered out yet. So there are reasons for caution moving forward. And again, Jay, we were talking about the recent rise in inflation. The Fed definitely has measures to take care of it. The Fed is predicting that the inflationary spikes we're seeing are temporary. Other indicators indicate that may or may not be the case. So either way, we need to focus on how we can move forward and grow ourselves, our money, our jobs, our businesses. We need to figure out how we can grow and still protect ourselves against loss. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the rule of 100. And this one's a really good one. So this one talks about how cautious should we be with our money. So the rule of 100, say, take your age. 100 minus your age should be the percentage of your money that is in risky investments like the stock market. We're not talking about risk in terms of how much things can grow. We're talking about risk simply in terms of whether or not you have the potential to lose your money. So the rule of 100, let's say you're 20 years old. The rule of 100 says that 20% of your money should be in safe investments and 80% of your money should be in riskier investments. And that's great. You have the potential to grow. You have plenty of years ahead of you to recover from any losses you might suffer. Now, let's say you're older. I'm talking to a friend of mine. She's in her 60s. She is divorced and has been a stay-at-home mom her entire life. So the rule of 100 says that 60% of her money should be in safe investments, and she can kind of afford to use 40% of her money to grow in possibly risky investments. But for her, she's really oriented more towards risk. So the rule of 100 is easy to understand, but it's also a guideline. I tend to be more safety minded, you know, that's why I do what I do. And your tendency towards risk or safety has to do with a lot of different things. One is your age. Again, the younger you are, the riskier you can afford to be. Second is gender. Women tend to be more safety minded than men. But third is personal preference. If you grew up in a poor household, you might be all in on risk, thinking, I got to get ahead, I'm never going to go back to that place. Or you might, because of that childhood, you might have a bigger tendency towards safety. I want security because I didn't have it when I was younger. So rule of 100 and your attitude towards risk safety really depends on a lot of different factors. And then we're going to talk about, what we do about that safety. And so as we all know, I'm actually going to use a different marker because this one's a little bit light. So as we all know, the stock market kind of does like this. It goes up and down, generally in an upward format. And one thing to really understand is what happens and what do losses really mean. So we're actually going to go back in time because this is really one of my favorite examples. I could use 2008, but the stock market crash of 2000 is also a really good example. So in the year 2000, what the stock market did is from the end of 2000 all the way through 2001 and 2002 went down, down, down. We lost 46% in 2.5 years, 46%. And then the following year in 2003, the stock market had one of its best years ever. It rose 30%. People, awesome, 30%. Guess what that means? You're still underwater. So then it took all the way till 2007 for the stock market to make it back to even. So if I came to you and I said, Joshua, hey, man, I got this great deal for you. All right, give me your money. I'm going to invest it for you. And in 7 years, I'm going to give you the same amount of money. Like, that's a terrible deal, right? And a lot of people are thinking, oh no, Melissa, you are so wrong. My money recovered way faster than that. Well, that might be true, but for a lot of people that happened because you were still contributing money. So if you just took your money and left it alone, it would take about 7 years to recover from that first crash. And then, the rest of 2007 was pretty good. And then 2008 happened and we lost 42% in 10 months. 10 months. And then it took 5 years. This is not to scale. I don't do drawings.
That's what spreadsheets are for.
That's what spreadsheets are for, right? So it took another 5 years for people to get back to even there. And again, the other interesting thing is that first year, 2009, we gained 23% in 1 year. Now, it still means you're underwater. And then from 2009 to 2020, people kind of think that it was a straight shot, right? Actually, from 2009 to 2020, we had 4 years. We had 1 year of zero and 3 years of slight downturns. Over time, we know that in any 10-year period, 3 of those years are going to be down years to some extent or another. So that 2009 to 2020 period actually was perfectly on par with our normal historical run. So it was not straight up. We had a couple years of normal, a couple years of down, but overall, it got to be normal. And then 2020 happened, and then we kind of did this. So 2020 was kind of all over the place. We're going to kind of need to let things settle. So when I look at numbers, I generally don't include 2020 in looking at averages and historical returns. So going back to why is zero our hero? Because there's a lot of different types of accounts that are considered safe money. They have a 0% floor and you can never lose money in those. And that's not really that exciting. So let's say we start out here, and 2000 we make nothing, in 2001 we make nothing, in 2002 we make nothing. And you're like, Melissa, what am I paying you for? This is ridiculous. Why did I ever listen to you? And then I have the fun job of saying, yes, you might be making nothing, but all of your friends are down 46%. And that's when you look at me and you say, oh my gosh, Melissa, zero is my hero. So that's where zero is your hero comes in. And you can't get something for nothing. And so if you are guaranteed a 0% floor, you usually also have a cap. Now that cap might be 10 or 12% on your money. Now, if I came to you and I said, Jay, Robin, Joshua, you got 12% this year. And you say, you're never going to be mad at me for making that much money, right? But you might say, Melissa, I only made 12% and all of my friends made 30%. And then I'll remind you, yes, and all of your friends are still underwater. So they had minus and a little bit of plus. So they're about halfway back to where they should be. They're still underwater. And since you had those zeros, you are actually up compared to all of your friends. Now, diversification is really important. You do want some of your money in the riskier investments because they do have the potential to grow better. But you also want some of your money in safe money. So right now, what I would encourage all of you to do is look at how much of your money is in risky investments and how much is in safe investments, and balance that according to your age, your personal preference, and just make sure you are protected on all fronts. So the economy is doing really well. For right now, there are some reasons to be cautious, and the best thing we can do is diversify. Have a little bit of something in different types of accounts that each have their own advantages. I'm not an all or nothing person. Oh, if we can have safe money, why don't we put it all there? You can absolutely do that. And that's safe money is a really big part of my retirement. Everyone's got different tolerances, and you should never have all of your money in one place or with one person. That is all. Any questions? What does everyone think? You agree? Disagree? I make bad
I mean, I
jokes?
certainly agree with where we put our money.
Don't say you don't like my jokes, because I think I'm hysterical. So I'm the one who has to live with it, though.
You are hysterical. You're very funny.
Oh, thanks. Looks aren't everything, though. So. Well, thanks for joining us again, Jay. I'm sorry.
And you're punny too.
Very punny. Well, thanks for joining us again, Jay. I hope your work emergency was okay, was easily dealt with.
Yeah, some unfortunate news, but everything's okay.
That's right. Well, I think we are done for the day. We're going to wrap up a few minutes early if no one has any final comments. All right. Well, happy Tuesday to you all. I wish you all an excellent May, and go forth and be awesome.
Take care, everyone.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.